Snowbell Town. That winter was colder than any before. The wind lashed through every crack in the doors, howling with a dry, piercing sound like winter's whisper. The entire town of Snowbell lay silent under a thick, gray-white blanket of snow. The old pine tree in front of house number 47 stood still like a statue, its bare branches trembling in the cold, covered in a thin layer of frost that clung to it like quiet memories of the past. The house where Luna lived sat at the end of a small slope, its brick walls faded and its roof sagging as if it had grown weary with time. Unlike the other houses in town, no smoke rose from its chimney, because inside the cold was more than just air. It was a feeling. Luna sat quietly by the living room window, where each morning she wiped away the frost on the glass just to look outside, even though there was nothing to see. A 7-year-old girl with light brown hair tied to one side. She wore a faded sky blue sweater, its sleeves too long and always damp with cold. Her eyes, amber brown and heavy with sorrow, no longer held light. Not the kind of sadness that cries out, but a quiet one, like a frozen lake without a ripple. Luna's father had once been a firefighter, a tall man with bright eyes and a constant smile. Every time he came home, he would lift her off the ground and spin her around the warm kitchen, which always smelled of her mother's cookies. But that was before the wildfire west of town took him away, and took Luna's winter too, even as snow continued to fall outside. Just 2 weeks later, Luna's mother, on her way to her husband's memorial, was hit by a skidding truck on the icy road. She had been lying in the town hospital ever since, never waking up. Luna didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't break things. She just went quiet. Daniel, her stepfather, was now the only one left in the house, but the connection between them was as thin as the frost on the windowpane. Daniel was a quiet man, clumsy with emotions, and it seemed he too was struggling, with grief and with the strange reality of living with a child who barely spoke. The house had felt empty ever since Luna's father passed. The faint smell of old burnt wood lingered in the air. Family photos still hung on the walls like shadows of a life that used to be. The kitchen lights were rarely turned on now. Daniel would usually cook something simple, fried eggs, pasta, or sometimes toast, leave Luna's plate on the table, and silently retreat into his study. Luna didn't ask, didn't touch the food right away either. She would quietly take her plate upstairs after making sure Daniel was no longer in the kitchen. Her room was small and cold. The heater had broken the previous winter. She slept under 3 blankets, clutching a worn-out teddy bear named Teddy, a gift from her dad on her 5th birthday, and often woke up in the middle of the night from dreams of fire truck sirens, her mother's panicked voice calling her name, and then silence. No friends came by. No one at school asked about her anymore. Not after the first few weeks when people still remembered her name. Her teacher occasionally wrote notes in her school journal, but Daniel never opened it. Mornings in Snowbell felt like they were veiled in mist. The sky was a dull gray, clouds heavy as if they were about to cry. Luna walked to school on a snow-covered path, her tiny steps leaving behind lonely prints. The pale yellow streetlights reflected in her eyes, casting a tired, dim glow. The townspeople whispered about that little girl, the one with eyes sadder than even Snowbell's winter. They felt sorry for her, but no one knew what to do. Like Daniel, they couldn't find a way into the frozen world of a child's grieving heart. Luna didn't speak, but she remembered. Everything. Her father's voice calling her, "Little Star," her mother's hand stroking her hair at bedtime, the crackling sound of the fireplace on Christmas night. And now, with those memories reduced to scattered pieces in her mind, Luna shrank into herself, as if she became quiet enough, small enough, the pain might disappear too. But pain doesn't disappear. It runs silently in the blood, hides in every breath, and wraps itself around you every time the snow falls. One morning, as Luna sat by the window like always, she saw a small white cat trembling in the snowy backyard. A red smear stained its fur, perhaps a wound. But what made Luna unable to look away was its eyes, sad, lost, and silent, just like hers. And in that moment, for the first time in months, something inside Luna's heart stirred. Just the tiniest bit, like the blink of an eye in an endless winter. Part 2. Meeting Sunny, the first ray of hope. That morning, Snowball saw no snowfall, something rare in this seemingly endless winter. The sky remained overcast, but patches of earth peeked through the melting snow, scattered like half-formed memories. Inside house number 47, Luna sat by the window as usual, resting her chin on her knees, her eyes searching for the little white cat from yesterday, but it hadn't returned. She didn't know what she was hoping for. Maybe the cat. Maybe just something different. And then that something different came. Quietly, unexpectedly. A knock on the door rang out just before noon. Strange. Daniel rarely had visitors. No one ever came to this house, which felt like it had been erased from the town's map. Daniel went to open the door, still in a crumpled shirt and with tired eyes. Outside stood a man in his 40s, sun-kissed skin, salt and pepper hair, and a warm smile, like a small fire lit in an extinguished hearth. Beside him was a worn travel bag and a small basket covered in a blue knit blanket. "Hello," the man said, his voice carrying a gentle Spanish lilt. "I'm Mateo Ruiz, an old friend of James." The sound of her father's name struck something deep in Luna's heart. She tilted her head, peeking out from behind the curtain. Daniel paused, then looked away. Come in." Mateo stepped inside, removed his hat, brushed the snow from his shoulders, and glanced around the old house as if sifting through memories. "James and I were in the same firefighting unit. We made a promise. If anything ever happened to one of us, the other would fulfill a promise on their behalf." He knelt down and pulled back the blanket covering the basket. A tiny golden puppy poked its head out, bright eyes, floppy ears, and an innocent charm that made the room feel a touch warmer. James planned to give Luna a puppy for her 8th birthday. He said it would be the light to help her through anything. And I think it's time. No one said anything for a moment. Then something no one expected happened. Luna stepped out from behind the curtain. She didn't speak. She didn't rush. She simply walked toward the basket, knelt down, and looked into the puppy's curious eyes. The puppy looked back. It wagged its tail gently, crawled out of the basket, and licked Luna's fingers. For the first time in months, her hand did not hang limply. Something small bloomed in her eyes. Not quite a smile, but a light. And that was when Mateo heard her voice for the first time. "I'll call him Sunny, because he feels warm." Mateo turned to Daniel and smiled softly. "See? She still remembers how to name the light." That afternoon, Sunny zipped around the house like a tiny whirlwind, stirring the air that had long stood still. Luna followed him everywhere, from the kitchen to the living room, then to the backyard, as if she had found a part of herself she thought was lost. The little dog didn't bark much or cause trouble. He seemed to understand that this was not a place used to noise. But somehow, with every gentle lick on Luna's hand and every tilted ear glance, he whispered, "I'm here with you." By evening, when Daniel emerged from his study, he saw Sunny curled up asleep at Luna's feet, while she sat quietly flipping through an old picture book, her fingers tracing the faded pages. He stood in the hallway, still, watching. The sight softened something in him, but only for a moment before his logic kicked back in. "Luna," he said, his voice firm but not harsh, "the dog can't stay inside the house." She looked up, didn't argue, didn't plead. Just silently lifted Sunny into her arms and walked to the back porch, where an old wooden shed once used to store firewood. She placed the puppy down gently, spread her worn sweater as a makeshift bed, and walked back inside without a word. Daniel watched from the window. Her small figure passed through the thin snow, leaving 2 lonely trails leading back to her room. Alone. That night the wind howled, snow returned, the moon disappeared behind heavy clouds, and the temperature dropped sharply. Daniel couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, then finally sat up. Something weighed on his chest. He went down to the kitchen to make tea, and that's when he heard a rustle outside. He looked out the window. Luna, wrapped in a blanket, was walking to the shed. She opened the door, checked on Sunny, then laid down beside him, covering them both with the blanket. The sight hit him like a punch to the chest. He remembered the look in her eyes when she met the puppy. Remembered Mateo's words. She still remembers how to name the light. light, something he, as an adult, had forgotten how to look for. And so, in the bitter cold of a winter night, as snow thickened once again outside, a man stood silently at the window, staring toward the old shed, where a small heart was trying to keep warm with all the love she had left. Part 3. Fleeting Warm Days. The snow kept falling in the days that followed, but to Luna, winter seemed a little less cold. Sunny followed her everywhere, from her bedroom to the living room, to the back porch, and even along the narrow path to school. Though he wasn't allowed to stay indoors for long, every morning after Daniel left for work, Luna would quietly open the door, dry Sunny's little paws, and whisper, "Just for a little while, okay?" And Sunny seemed to understand. He would curl up in an old towel under the dining table, occasionally lifting his gaze to his small owner with peaceful eyes. When Luna studied, he rested his head on her knee. When she slept, he lay curled beside the wooden shed, ears perked, guarding her world. Gradually, Luna began to talk more. Not to adults, but to Sunny. "My dad used to play the guitar," she whispered one afternoon as they sat in the backyard, snowflakes dusting her hair. "He played 'You Are My Sunshine' every Sunday night." Sunny tilted his head, his tail tapping lightly on the snow as if asking to hear more. "My mom liked to grow white roses. She said they looked like my smile. But now I'm not sure. I haven't smiled in a long time." Sunny nuzzled into her hand, and for the first time in many months, Luna let out a soft giggle, short and shaky, like a bell chime threading through the snow. In the afternoons after school, Luna no longer retreated straight to her room. She cut colored paper to make a collar for Sunny, gave names to corners of the yard like the White Snow Kingdom, the Silent Castle, and the Hill of Memories. In each place, she told Sunny a story. About her 6th birthday, when her dad's cake collapsed, about the time her mom taught her how to plant a seed, and even about her silly dream, to open a bakery that gave away treats to anyone feeling sad. It was as if, in every story told, Luna was stitching torn memories back together, using a thread made of loyal brown eyes that never left her side. But not everyone saw it that way. One evening, Daniel came home from work and found Luna drying Sunny's belly in the kitchen. The floor was wet from melting snow, and the scent of wet dog mixed uneasily with dinner. "Luna." His voice wasn't loud, but it was heavy. "You know dogs aren't allowed inside." She lowered her head. Sunny stepped back behind her legs. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "He was cold. I just wanted to let him in. For a little while." Daniel gripped the back of the chair. "Your father is gone, Luna, and this is a house for the living, not for treating dogs like family." Luna looked up. Her eyes weren't angry, just hurt, deeply. "He's a gift from my dad." Daniel turned away, preparing tea, his voice rough. "Yes, but don't give too much of your heart to something that won't stay. When it's gone, you'll break again." Luna stood still, those words cold as wind cutting through her sweater. After a pause, she whispered, barely audible, "I've already lost my dad and my mom. I have nothing left to be afraid of." The kitchen fell silent. Only the soft hiss of the kettle remained. After that day, Daniel grew more distant. He didn't ban Sunny outright, but his expression darkened whenever he saw the puppy, and the house's air turned heavier. Luna understood. Even at 7, loss had taught her how to read the unspoken in adults, the meaning in every sigh. So she took Sunny outside more often. They wandered down foggy roads, sat beneath the old pine tree listening to the wind whistle through the branches, or simply lay together in the shed, sharing a blanket. With Sunny, Luna didn't have to try. She didn't need to be strong. She didn't need to be cheerful. She could just be herself. Those days, though short, were the first in a long time that Luna felt she was living, not just surviving. One late afternoon, as snow turned to sleet, Sunny bounded through the backyard, and Luna chased after him, her laughter ringing out like silver bells against the white sky. Daniel in the kitchen stood watching through the frosted glass. He couldn't help but think of James, his best friend, his teammate, the man who once saved his life from an explosion, and of James's final message sent through Mateo, "If anything happens to me, let Luna feel loved in her own way." But he also remembered himself. losing his father at 12, raising a puppy only to bury it beneath the apple tree, and his mother's voice, "Loving fragile things is the most dangerous love of all." Daniel took a deep breath. He knew deep down that the real battle wasn't between him and a dog, but between him and an unhealed past, and he wasn't ready to lose. Outside in the snowy yard, a little brown-haired girl held a golden puppy close. Her cheeks were rosy and her eyes shone like a falling star across a long night. Unaware that her small, fleeting happiness was slowly thawing another frozen heart, but also unaware that a new storm might be on its way. Part 4. Tragedy in the Snow. A blizzard warning had been issued early that morning. The town's radio station broadcast repeated messages urging residents to stay indoors, stock up on food, and avoid going out unless absolutely necessary. The sky was a thick gray, wind howling through every crevice, tearing down even the strongest pine branches. Snow fell in heavy sheets, blanketing Snowbell in a massive, cold silence. Inside the old house at the bottom of the hill, Luna sat on the living room floor, wrapping a scarf gently around Sunny, the little dog dozing peacefully in her lap. She smiled faintly, whispering, "I think if Dad were still here, he would have liked you too." Sunny lifted his head and nuzzled her cheek. In the dim yellow light, the scene felt peaceful, so delicate it could shatter at any moment. And then it did. Heavy footsteps echoed from behind. Daniel stood in the kitchen doorway, his eyes cold and locked on the muddy snow prints across the rug. His gaze shifted to Sunny, then down to the small puddle forming from the wet fur. "You let him in?" Luna looked up, startled, her voice small. "The storm's really bad. I just wanted him to be safe." Daniel clenched his fists. He didn't yell, but every word dropped like ice in the frozen air. "Don't you understand? He's just a dog, not a person. He's not your father." The comparison cut like a blade. Luna pulled Sunny closer, retreating slightly. "But he's my friend. He's the last thing Dad left me." Daniel stepped forward, silent now, and grabbed Sunny's leash with a harsh tug. Sunny yelped in fear. Luna jumped up, clinging to Daniel's arm. "Please don't. He didn't do anything wrong. Don't take him." "You're too attached," Daniel growled through clenched teeth. "You need to learn loss, Luna. Dogs don't stay forever. Better to let go now than later." He opened the door. The wind slammed into the house like knives. Snow swept in. Sunny was dragged out, leaving a mess of paw prints behind. Luna screamed in despair, but her voice was lost to the storm. Night fell quickly. The wind roared. Snow swirled in white waves like ghostly fog. Daniel brought Sunny to the small park nearby, now deserted, its benches and trees shivering under layers of snow. Without hesitation, he tied the leash to the base of a large tree near the frozen lake. Sunny whimpered, pulling at the rope, eyes wide and confused. "I'm sorry," Daniel muttered. "This is what's best for everyone." Then he turned and walked away, leaving the little dog trembling in the storm, swallowed by the wind. But he didn't see Luna, who had followed him the entire way. No thick coat, no gloves, just her old scarf and tiny feet sinking into the snow. She ran, driven by instinct, chasing the fading sound of Sunny's barks. And then she found him, alone, tied to a tree, shivering in the blizzard. Snow blanketed his back, his fur soaked through. Without hesitation, Luna rushed forward. She took off her scarf and wrapped it around Sunny's body. "Sunny," she cried, hugging him tight as the wind howled and the snow clung to her hair. "I'm here. I'm not leaving you." Sunny licked her cheek, as if to say thank you, as if to whisper, "You're my home too." Cold, bitter cold. Luna sat down in the snow, pulling Sunny into her arms, shielding him from the wind with her small body. Her lips had turned blue, her fingers numb, but she didn't let go. Darkness fell like an invisible curtain. Down the street, warm lights from distant houses flickered through the fog. But no one knew that a little girl was performing the bravest act of all, in the heart of the harshest winter. Back in the empty house, Daniel sat at the kitchen table. His hands trembled. Not from cold, but from something deeper. The fireplace was still cold. His eyes drifted to the empty spot where Sunny usually lay, and suddenly, moved by something he couldn't name, fear, guilt, or something older, Daniel jumped up. Luna! The blizzard had not stopped, and in the middle of the snow-covered park, a 7-year-old girl huddled beside a puppy, her breath weakening, but her eyes still shining like twin flames defying the sky. She didn't know how long she could hold on, but she knew this. If she let go of Sunny, she'd lose something else, and she couldn't bear one more loss. From the misty road beyond the trees, footsteps began pounding the snow. Urgent, fast, and maybe this time, it wouldn't be someone leaving, but someone coming back. Part 5, Rescue and Recovery. The snow had not stopped falling. The sky over Snowbell remained blanketed by an endless mass of white, as though the town were trapped beneath a giant quilt of cotton. The wind screamed through the streets, rattling window panes like a wordless warning. At house number 45, just a few doors down from Luna's home, Riley Bloom, a young woman who lived alone with her long-haired cat, was making tea by the window. She usually didn't pay much attention to her neighbors, especially on cold days like this. But something caught her eye out in the distance, in the park. Movement. She frowned, stepped closer to the window, wiped the fog from the glass, narrowed her eyes, and her heart clenched. Oh, God! Not even bothering to grab a proper coat, Riley snatched her flashlight and the thickest blanket she owned and ran out the door. The wind slapped her face like needles. The snow reached her calves, but she didn't stop. Her flashlight beam swept across the park, and there, like a miracle caught in its glow, it landed on the base of a large tree. There, Luna sat, slumped forward, clutching Sunny. Both were motionless. The stillness terrified Riley more than any storm ever could. Sunny's breathing was faint, his eyes shut, his little nose twitching. Luna! Oh my God! Riley dropped to her knees, wrapping the blanket over their small, frozen bodies. She gently shook the little girl. Luna, can you hear me? Stay with me, sweetheart. Don't fall asleep. No reply, but there was still breath. Hold on, Riley whispered, tears mixing with the snow. I've got you. Within 10 minutes, Riley had carried both Luna and Sunny back to her house. She didn't even remove her boots, just laid them on the thick rug before the fireplace and lit a roaring fire. Then she called the only number she trusted in emergencies. Mrs. Heller, the retired nurse from the end of the street. Over 30 years in the town's hospital, there was no one better. In less than 10 minutes, Mrs. Heller arrived, arms full with a medical bag, a hot water bottle, and trembling hands that somehow remained steady. She immediately checked Luna's vitals. She's hypothermic, but you got her here in time. Her heart's slow, but steady. We need to warm her up, gently. Sunny was dried off, wrapped in towels, and placed beside Luna. As warmth from the fireplace spread, the little dog let out a soft whimper, as if to say he was still here. Not bad, Mrs. Heller murmured with a faint smile as she saw Riley sigh in relief. Small dog, big spirit. 2 hours later. The fire still crackled. The tea had gone cold, but Riley hadn't moved from the couch, where Luna now slept, her hair damp against her forehead, a hint of pink returning to her cheeks. She hadn't woken yet, but every sign was promising. Sunny lay curled beside her, his head resting on her hand. It was as if neither wanted to be apart, as if being separated would make something precious vanish forever. Riley gently brushed Luna's hair and whispered, You're a little warrior, you know that. Mrs. Heller nodded from the nearby armchair. I've never seen a child fight like that. She didn't just save a dog, she held on to her hope. Riley pulled the blanket tighter around Luna, and this time, hope held on back. Morning came. The snow finally began to ease. The first soft rays of daylight streamed through the window, lighting up Luna's face. Her lashes fluttered, and a quiet breath escaped her lips. Slowly, her eyes opened, brown and alive. The first thing she saw was Sunny, his head still resting in her hand. And when he opened his eyes too, their gaze met, girl and dog, as if sharing a joy words couldn't express. Riley's voice broke the silence, soft and emotional. Good morning, Luna. You're safe now. Luna said nothing, but a single tear rolled down her cheek, not from cold, but from warmth. For the first time in a long time, Luna felt protected. Elsewhere in Snowbell, Daniel hadn't slept. He had run through the night, searching the park, the school, the neighborhood. But the snow had erased every trail. In the pale light of dawn, he stood motionless outside Riley's house. The porch light still glowed. Through the frosted window, he saw Luna asleep on the couch, curled beside Sunny. His heart pounded. But instead of knocking, he stood there for a long time, gripping his hat, unsure if he even had the right to knock. He didn't know what he'd say, or if he deserved to say anything. All he knew was this: that little girl, with all the love she gave to a lonely creature, had taught him something he had forgotten. Love doesn't need to make sense. It just needs to be real. And in the soft light of that new day, though the snow had not yet melted, something warm had already begun to thaw, from the little house at the end of the hill to the hearts of those who had forgotten how to love. To part 6, Finding Her Voice. The fourth morning after the blizzard, Riley's home was bathed in light. Pale sunlight filtered through the windows, casting soft beams across the polished wooden floor and making everything feel almost peaceful. Luna sat curled in an armchair, a woolen scarf wrapped around her, hair tied neatly, her cheeks still rosy from a mild fever she had been fighting off. Sonny lay at her feet, resting his head on a fuzzy slipper Riley had gifted him. The very first present he'd ever received in the little girl's world. No one pushed her to talk. Riley didn't ask questions. Mrs. Heller, who stopped by daily with warm porridge, simply smiled. And somehow that silence didn't make Luna feel forgotten. It gave her space to listen inwardly, to hear herself again. Then one quiet afternoon, while Riley was dusting the window frame, she heard it. A voice. Software. Small, but clear. "Miss Riley." Riley turned, eyes wide with surprise. "I want to go home." The next day, Riley walked Luna back to the house at the bottom of the hill. The air was still cold, but the snow was slowly melting. That house, though old and echoing, was full of memories Luna couldn't leave behind. Daniel wasn't home. He had left a short note. "Come in." This house has always been Luna's. Luna stepped in slowly, as if every tile on the floor carried echoes of the past. Sonny followed close behind, glancing back at Riley, then trotting to Luna's side. She didn't go to her old room. Instead, she opened the attic door, the one that had always been locked because "there's nothing important up there," as Daniel once said. Dust clung to the wooden stairs. The air was thick with old paper, aged wood, and the scent of her father. Luna climbed carefully, eyes searching. The attic was filled with old boxes, framed photos, childhood toys, and the things her father had once cherished. A fireman's helmet, a worn leather notebook, and a small wooden box etched with the word Luna. She opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter, the scrawl messy but full of warmth. "To my little star, if you're reading this, I might not be with you anymore. But I want you to remember this. Your voice is the most beautiful thing I've ever known. Whatever happens, no matter who tries to quiet you or make you feel afraid, don't let them take it away. Your voice is light. It's how you change the world. You don't need to shout. Just daring to speak is already powerful. Love you always, Dad." Luna sat down on the attic floor. The tears didn't fall like a storm, but slowly, one by one, like the first raindrops after a long drought. She held the letter close to her chest, and she knew it was time. 2 days later, Karen, a child welfare officer from Snowbell, arrived at Riley's house. She had come to conduct a follow-up after Luna's disappearance during the blizzard. Karen had auburn hair and a firm expression, but her presence wasn't cold. She took a seat at the table, opened her notebook, and spoke gently. "Luna, can you tell me what happened?" "I'm here to listen." "No pressure." Luna sat upright, her hands resting in her lap. Sonny lay nearby, calm eyes fixed on his little human. Luna reached into her sweater and pulled out an envelope. She placed it on the table. "I found this letter. From my dad." Karen unfolded the letter and read it slowly. Her face softened. When she reached the line, "Your voice is light," she looked up. And then Luna spoke. without shaking, without hesitation. Her gaze was steady, her voice was soft but resolute. He never hit me, never hurt me, but he took my voice. Karen didn't interrupt. She just nodded gently. He didn't shout, he didn't break things, but he made me feel small, like I didn't have the right to speak. Luna took a breath, resting her hand on Sonny's back. He took away my sense of safety. He took Sonny too, but now I've taken them back. Karen watched her in silence, and in that moment, it wasn't a caseworker sitting with a child. It was one soul witnessing another, brave and honest. Thank you, Luna, she said slowly. You are very, very brave. When Karen stepped outside Riley's house, she looked back through the window. Luna was sitting on the porch, a blank notebook in her lap. Every so often, she scribbled something down, then smiled at Sonny. The afternoon sun touched her cheek, warm as any fire. Her voice had returned, not loud, not angry, but steady, like roots holding firm beneath the snow, like the first flicker of light after a storm. And at the far end of the slope, a man stood watching her from a distance, his heart torn between regret and hope, that maybe one day she might speak to him again, not with fear, but with forgiveness. Part 7. The Spring of Hope. By early March, the snow had begun to melt. The soft white that had blanketed Snowbell all winter now receded into thin patches along the roadside. The sun climbed higher, warming the old brick rooftops and rousing birds from their long seasonal sleep. On the bare branches, the first green buds emerged, gentle proof that time, however slow, always moves forward. And within Luna, spring was quietly blooming too. That morning she woke early. No nightmares. No recurring dreams of fire, sirens, or disappointed eyes. Just Sonny, curled beside her, snoring softly like an old clock ticking peacefully through time. Luna got up and walked to the window. The tall pine in the backyard, the one she and Sonny once named the Silent Castle, still stood proudly among the gray grass. But instead of snow, it now wore drops of dew and the very first signs of green. She smiled. Then she opened her drawer and took out a paper star she had folded the night before, pale yellow with a line of pencil-written words, "Sonny, my little light." She walked outside across damp soil, climbed onto the old wooden stool, and hung the star from the lowest branch. A soft breeze passed, causing the star to sway gently, spinning once before settling, as if nodding in approval. Sonny trotted over, gazing up, his ears folded slightly as if he were listening to something no one else could hear. Luna leaned down and whispered, "This is for you, and for Dad, and Mom, and for me too." That afternoon, Riley stopped by, with a warm mug of cocoa and a large print newspaper thick with fresh ink. "I thought you'd want to see this," she said with a smile, placing the paper on the table. Luna wiped her hands and unfolded it. At the center was a bold headline, "When a child saved a dog, and the dog saved her right back." Beneath it, a photo taken from a distance, Luna holding Sonny by the fireplace, eyes closed, the firelight forming a quiet halo around them both. Riley read aloud softly. The article tells the story of a young girl, identified only as Little L, and how a small act of kindness saved a soul that had almost given up. Luna sat still. She didn't know whether to cry or smile. And this part, Riley pointed out, they quoted Mrs. Heller. "Sometimes those who need saving the most end up saving us, not with strength, but with unconditional love." Luna gently brushed her hand over the page, then glanced at Sonny, dozing peacefully beneath the table, tail wagging as if he knew he'd just been mentioned. Later that evening, the phone rang in Riley's house. Luna was folding more paper stars when Riley called her to the living room. "Luna, there's someone who wants to talk to you." Riley handed her the phone, her eyes shimmering. From the other end came a voice, weak but full of emotion. Luna's breath caught in her throat. "My sweet girl, it's Mom." Luna froze. Her heart pounded. She couldn't remember how long she'd waited for those words, since the last time her mother had hugged her in the car, smiling, saying, "We'll be okay." "You're awake?" Luna asked, voice trembling. "The doctors say it's a miracle. I didn't respond for 3 months, but then I heard your voice in a dream. You said, Mom, please come back. I need you. And I came back. Luna burst into tears, not the tears of sorrow, but the sudden flood when a door finally opens after a winter that seemed endless. I missed you so much, she sobbed, but I'm not afraid anymore. Sunny stayed with me, and I found my voice again. Mom. On the other end, her mother laughed through her own tears. I'm so proud of you. That night the cold returned, but no one felt cold. Luna and Sunny curled up under the thickest blanket on the sofa, beside the glowing fireplace. Riley had read her a chapter of a storybook before bed, and now only the crackle of wood and the gentle rhythm of breathing filled the room. Sunny rested his head on Luna's chest. His heartbeat was soft, a gentle knocking at the door of a new life. On the window, the paper stars swayed quietly in the evening breeze. They didn't shine, but they whispered, with every breath, every flutter. We're proud of you. And spring had truly come, not just to the town of Snowbell, but to the heart of a little girl who dared to hold on to the light and found a way to shine it back into the world.